Hey guys, my name is Kenneth Payton, and I have a question that I want to ask you. Have you ever felt discouraged? I remember a time that I came home to visit the family and I saw my sister put down her daughter, Harley. Harley is 2 years old and she went to go play with the other kids, and which is fine. However, the thing about Harley is that whenever she turns around, she has to be able to see mom, right? So as she's playing with the bigger kids and she begins to get more involved, she ends up getting hurt, right, as kids do. And she immediately starts to cry. As the uncle, I was like, man, this is my time. I'm about to go rescue her. I'm about to be the superhero, and everything is going to be okay. I was wrong. I tried to console her, didn't work. I tried to give her books and toys, stuff, just things to distract her, and that didn't work either. So as I'm sitting there trying to get my niece to stop crying, her mom walks in, right? And as soon as that happens, Riley gets up, she runs to her mom, and she gets picked up by my sister. While she's there, my sister starts to just whisper these words of encouragement. She's saying things like, "It's okay, mommy's here. Don't worry no more. There's nothing to worry about, and everything's gonna be all right." And it was crazy because the tears stopped, and just moments after that, Harley was passed out on, or in, I should say, her mother's arms. All right. So I want to ask you again, have you ever been discouraged? Now, perhaps you are not like Harley in the sense that you're a little kid and you're running to your mom to get picked up and be, consoled. But maybe, just maybe, it was somebody at work that did this to you. Maybe it was a coworker and they said something or did something that put you in emotional distress, and now you are on the run. Or maybe it's more situational, such as a class or just school in general, where you started out so strong and you thought you were going to do all these awesome things as a student and you're going to just get good grades or what have you, and just somewhere along the journey you begin to feel discouraged or defeated or just wanted to quit. There's a man in the Bible by the name of Elijah. Now, you might have heard of Elijah, but the story that you heard might have been about Elijah calling fire down from heaven. That God was with Elijah and he called fire down from heaven, and he destroyed all of the false prophets. Now, that's probably the story you heard. But maybe you didn't hear the story where Elijah was so discouraged that he was all alone and that Jezebel was trying to kill him, that he was on the run, right? So let me fill you in. So Elijah had just did that miracle. Jezebel found out. She says that she's going to kill Elijah. Elijah's running for his life. He knows that the Lord had an encounter with Moses in Mount Sinai, and so he himself was going to Mount Sinai. Now, the interesting thing is that when Elijah gets to Mount Sinai, the Lord says this to him in 1 Kings 19:9. Let me read it for you. It says, "But the Lord said to him, 'What are you doing here, Elijah?'" Now look at you might be thinking like, "Oh, that's not that important." But if you really look at it, this was not him asking Elijah, like, "What are you doing here?" Right? Because God already would have known that because he's God. But he's asking Elijah to unburden his heart. He's allowing him, instead of welcoming him with open arms, he's going to lend him open ears, and he's going to listen to what his servant has to say. So the next couple verses, or the next verse, I should say, excuse me, talks about this. He talks about what Elijah is going through, about how he's feeling alone, about how he's the last person there and everybody else have not been faithful, and he's being hunted down, right? So it picks back up in verse 11. It says, "Go out and stand before me on the mountain," the Lord told him. And as Elijah stood there, the Lord passed by, and a mighty windstorm hit the mountain. It was such a terrible blast that the rocks were torn loose, but the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, there was a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, there was the sound of a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his cloak and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. And a voice said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" So the first point I want to make is that the Lord is not dissuaded by your discouragement. Elijah was able to go and express his feelings to the Lord, and the Lord heard him out, and he was able to help Elijah through this. He didn't just kick him aside. He didn't, just throw him out. He lent his ear. For me, that was, as I was alluding to, school. There's a point in which I felt alone in this journey. I didn't know what I was going to do. I felt like I was just going to quit. Like, did I really hear you, God? I don't know. I was feeling discouraged, and I almost quit. But in those moments, I went to the Lord. I was like praying like crazy, and he encouraged me through those. He got me back on my feet. He got me pushing through. The second point that I want to make is that God's miracles allow us to see his greatness, but his whispers allow us to experience his closeness. Now, let me explain what I mean. In those verses, it talks about the fire, the wind, the earthquake, right? And God wasn't there. And oftentimes we want to run to those places that God once was, but he's no longer. Oftentimes, however, God speaks to us through his whispers. He wants to encourage us and nudge us through the more quiet times. It's not always about these grand miracles, but those times of prayer and just like leaning into the Lord. Now you might be saying, well, how does that apply to me? Well, let me tell you. You might have been sitting there looking for God in the fire or in the earthquakes or in the wind, because you know that's where he has been. You've been expecting these big miracles when instead you could have been just praying and asking God to meet you in that moment, right? And that's the biggest thing right there is imagine what it would look like, right? Imagine how much happier we would all be as a collective, and how much despair would dissipate and our discouragement would disappear if we would just slow down, acknowledge that God's not always going to be in these grand miracles or even to the places that we have seen him move before, but we just slow down, right? And we realize that the power is in the whisper, just as long as we take the time to be still and listen to him. Thanks, you guys. That's all I got.